Have you ever wondered what the very first moments are like after you take your last breath? In Islam, the grave isn't just a resting place. It's the opening of a new reality. Angels arrive, questions are asked, and your soul begins a journey most people spend their entire lives fearing but never fully understanding. Tonight, we step into that unseen world to find out the truth. What actually happens in those first moments beneath the earth? Stay with us as we uncover something both mysterious and profoundly important. What actually happens in the instant after your soul leaves your body? That question has haunted human imagination for centuries. In Islam, the answer isn't silence, and it isn't nothingness. The soul doesn't vanish into oblivion. Instead, it steps across a boundary, almost like moving from one room into another. Even if the two are separated by a curtain you can't lift until that exact moment. The body rests lifeless on the ground, but something deep inside it continues into what Muslims describe as a different phase of existence. That shift is sudden, and though invisible to the eyes of the living, it's unavoidable for the person who's just passed away. In many parts of the world, we grow up hearing that death is final. Secular views, rooted in materialism, frame it as the moment when the lights go out forever. But Islam treats death in a very different way. It's not an ending, it's a beginning. Think of it as a doorway cracked open by the force of time itself. You can't go back once you step through, and you can't pause in the frame. You go forward, whether you're ready or not. For a soul that held on to faith, that door doesn't swing open with violence. It opens with care, and the passage through it feels almost seamless. That same doorway, however, isn't gentle for everyone. Islamic tradition often explains that the believer's soul is taken smoothly, almost as if it's being lifted from the body with ease, like water pouring from a vessel. There's tenderness here, and even relief. For the wrongdoer, though, the departure is far from peaceful. The descriptions are stark. The soul doesn't glide out. It's pulled, forcefully and painfully, like something stuck within the body being scraped out. It's the same moment experienced in opposite extremes, and it reveals how one's life shapes even the very act of leaving it. The figure at the center of this event is the angel of death, known as Azrael. In narrations, he is the one commissioned to take the soul. His role isn't arbitrary. He doesn't appear early, and he doesn't appear late. His presence marks the exact second that the unseen world meets the seen. Hadiths describe how this angel, sometimes accompanied by helpers, approaches the person in their last moments. To the righteous, the angel and his company carry fragrances and greetings that calm their spirit, while to others they bring the severity of judgment, the kind that causes dread before the body has even gone cold. For the person leaving this world, there is both release and reckoning. Release because the suffocating pain or illness of the final days comes to an end the moment the soul departs. Reckoning because the freedom from worldly burden is immediately replaced by the weight of accountability. Imagine the relief of someone who has struggled for years with hardship, only for that relief to become the signal of a much larger responsibility. That's how Islam frames those first breaths outside the body, the start of a reality with no delay, no hiding, and no excuses. It's unsettling when you really think of it. 1 second, a person is surrounded by family, their name being whispered, their last breaths counted. The very next moment, known only to them, is nothing like the scene the living watch. Outside, there's quiet. Inside the unseen, there's contact. The soul recognizes that what it always heard about life after death wasn't folklore. Whether in comfort or terror, it now understands firsthand what it means to step into the unknown. And yet, what's striking is that this stage is only the introduction. These first moments are not considered the final judgment. They're the opening notes of a far longer sequence. Once the soul has been removed from the body, once the angel of death has completed the task, the world of the grave begins. And the grave is not empty. It's where the soul receives its very first visitors, angels who aren't there to comfort, but to question. Imagine lying in complete silence, the kind of silence where even your own breath isn't there anymore. You feel the weight of the earth pressing down, your body stiff, the world above unaware of what's happening below, and then suddenly you are not alone. Out of the darkness, two figures appear. According to Islamic belief, they are not gentle friends or familiar faces. They are Munkar and Nakir, angels whose job begins when everyone else has walked away from your grave. Their appearance isn't presented in soft pictures. They are described as having a stern, fearsome presence, their very look shaking the calm that once filled the darkness. For the soul, this isn't a polite introduction. It's the beginning of what the scholars call the questioning of the grave. The role of Munkar and Nakir is clear: to ask you about your deepest loyalties. A life spent with certain truths will find them easy to answer, but for others, these questions will catch in the throat. And these aren't exam-style queries where intellect and memory help you. In fact, Islamic teaching stresses that rehearsing the answers while you're alive doesn't guarantee success later. It isn't your cleverness that speaks here, it's your faith and deeds. The moment they ask, it isn't about memory recall. It's about whether your heart ever genuinely lived by what your tongue once said. The grave hears what you truly were, not what you pretended to be. What are they going to ask? The narrations mention three questions most often. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? And who is your prophet? In life, these might seem easy enough, even obvious, but here, stripped of your body and material crutches, there's no space for half convictions. The grave demands answers that only sincere faith can give. For the believer, the response flows naturally, almost effortless, as if the answers rise from the core of who they are. But for the heedless, the voice falters. Some are left stammering, saying, "I don't know," though in life they once claimed they did. Others may answer wrongly, their words betraying them as if a veil has been lifted. The atmosphere described in tradition isn't of calm dialogue. These angels are said to shake the earth with their voices, their presence filling the grave with a weight that terrifies. Imagine lying in a closed box under soil, heavy air pressing in, and then two imposing figures towering, their voices resonating like thunder inside a confined space. It isn't cruelty for its own sake, but a test, and your preparation for it has already been written by your actions in life. There is no bargaining here, no witty reply to escape. If your soul was firm in faith, the questions don't break you. But if you were careless or disbelieving, the silence itself becomes punishment, or the wrong answers condemn you further. Picture two very different moments. In one, a soul of faith answers with clarity, unshaken, and feels a calm settle around them. The angels acknowledge the truth of their words, and the grave begins to feel less like a prison and more like a resting place. In another, a soul who lived with indifference struggles to even recall the basic truths. Words won't form or come out twisted, and instead of being left alone, this soul faces a new form of torment. The grave constricts. The silence is broken by punishment rather than acceptance. It is said that the ground closing in can literally make the ribs crush together, amplifying the fear with physical pressure no one else can witness. We often imagine solitude when we think of being buried, but Islamic descriptions say the grave is anything but empty. This interrogation is the first defining moment in the soul's journey. How you answer shapes not just the short exchange with Munkar and Nakir, but every day that comes after, until the day of resurrection. The believer who answers truthfully now settles into ease, while the one who fails faces trials that stretch deep into what feels like endless waiting. And this is only the beginning. Once the questioning ends, the grave itself begins to change. For some, it becomes wide and welcoming, like a door swinging open to a bright garden. For others, it transforms into darkness, constricting, with the entrance tilted towards a pit of fire. The grave is not still. It responds, expanding and opening for some, or tightening into punishment for others. What does your grave actually feel like after the angels depart? The questioning passes, the voices fade, and you're left alone under the soil. But the grave doesn't stay still. In Islamic belief, this tiny space suddenly becomes alive. It shifts and reshapes itself depending on the answers you gave and the life you lived before arriving here. The grave isn't just a narrow pit carved into the ground. It's a spiritual chamber that either eases or suffocates you. You don't lie in a fixed, silent hole. You lie in a state that responds, stretching wide with comfort or closing in with dread. For the faithful, the experience is described in early reports with remarkable clarity. The grave opens up, expanding as far as the eye can see. Imagine being in a small room that suddenly dissolves into a limitless garden. A cool breeze flows through, carrying the scent of paradise. The walls no longer feel like barriers pressing against you. They withdraw so far that the space feels endless. It isn't just about physical relief either. The soul is made to witness its place in the next life. A window is opened, showing the beauty of what awaits, and that vision alone becomes its comfort during the long span of waiting. Time might drag in the earthly sense, but to the one surrounded by peace, it doesn't feel heavy. For the disbeliever or the negligent soul, the transformation is the exact opposite. The walls close inward until bones and ribs press into each other. The grave becomes so constricted that there's no room left to stretch or rest. Instead of a pleasant breeze, blasts of heat and a foul odor fill the space. And just as the righteous soul is shown a glimpse of paradise, this one is made to witness a window looking toward hell. A punishment both visual and spiritual. Nothing burns the skin here, not yet, but the torment of knowing what's to come becomes unbearable. It's a crushing darkness, not only pressing from outside, but also stirring fear inside. This state of the grave doesn't stand alone. Islam teaches that it is part of a place called Barzakh. Barzakh is a barrier, a realm between life as we recognize it and the great resurrection that comes later. You could think of it as a holding station, but one that is incredibly real, far from neutral. Here, your destiny is previewed. The punishments or comforts you face aren't final judgment, but they are in direct proportion to the kind of life you lived. It's a condition where the passage of time isn't measurable the way we know it. Days, years, even centuries pass above the ground, but for the soul inside, it can feel as though only moments have slipped by, or that an eternity has already weighed down. Many scholars explain this sensation by comparing it to dreams. When you sleep, hours may pass while you feel only minutes, or sometimes a short nap feels endless. In Barzakh, that stretching and squeezing of time is not limited to nightly rest. It becomes the constant reality. If you are greeted by comfort, the grave feels timeless in a pleasant way. But if you are surrounded by torment, the eternity feels painfully slow, each second dragging heavier than the last. That is why the grave feels eternal, even though the final day has not arrived yet. And this state isn't adjustable. There's no pause button or second chance once you're placed inside. the Prophet Muhammad described the grave as the first stop of the afterlife. If it goes well here, what follows will be easier. If it goes badly, the road ahead only worsens. The sheer permanence of the atmosphere, soothing or punishing, creates a deep sense of suspense. Every person must wait here, without exception, until the trumpet blast signals the day of gathering. For some, that wait is filled with fresh air, greenery, and a sense of closeness to God. For others, the same wait is suffocated by crushing ribs and sights that terrify. The realization here carries weight. The grave is active. It doesn't remain passive matter, silent dust. It responds to who you were, what choices you made, and where your loyalties lay. One person rests in an expanding garden, free to gaze at beauty and await reunion with joy. Another remains pinned within stifling darkness, window open to fire, counting the moments not as relief but as unending despair. But even within this waiting chamber, things don't stop. Deeds left behind continue echoing for better or worse, carrying rewards or punishments that reach the soul long after burial. The grave might be closed above ground, but inside, it remains open to what your life continues to send toward you. The realization here carries weight. The grave is active. It doesn't remain passive matter, silent dust. It responds to who you were, what choices you made, and where your loyalties lay. One person rests in an expanding garden, free to gaze at beauty and await reunion with joy. Another remains pinned within stifling darkness, window open to fire, counting the moments not as relief but as unending despair. But even within this waiting chamber, things don't stop. Deeds left behind continue echoing for better or worse, carrying rewards or punishments that reach the soul long after burial. The grave might be closed above ground, but inside, it remains open to what your life continues to send toward you. On the other side, neglect and wrongdoing manifest very differently. When deeds are harmful, the figure that appears is not comforting but terrifying, described as foul in appearance and producing a stench that unsettles the buried soul. Instead of warmth, it embodies fear. Instead of reassurance, it makes you dread the weight pressing down. This isn't metaphorical poetry. It's a warning that actions don't evaporate. They materialize in ways the living can't picture until it's too late. For someone who mocked prayer or ignored worship, it's narrated that their own prayer attempts speak against them. That emptiness walks in as their sole companion, multiplying the punishment already felt by their constricting grave. Let's place this into a human scene. Picture two different people. The first spent their life attentive to worship, pausing during their day to pray, reading Qur'an when they could, giving a little in charity, even when no one was watching. When this person enters the grave, they encounter their deeds taking the shape of a friend, pleasant in face and scent, a calm presence that reduces fear and assures them of what lies ahead. The grave itself already widened to welcome them, and now they are not even left alone. Their own deeds stand beside them, echoing back what they once invested in quietly. Now imagine another person who consistently neglected prayer, avoided good deeds, and treated morality as unimportant. When they find themselves in the grave, the comfort is missing. In its place stands a presence, ugly and unbearable, reflecting the reality of their wasted choices. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't let them breathe peacefully. It becomes their daily reminder of regret. This idea creates a deeper sense of accountability over even the smallest of actions. Think of the choices you make without much thought. Skipping prayer, ignoring the chance to help someone, or instead reading a page of Qur'an, smiling at another, or stepping away from something harmful. Each of these is light enough in daily routine to be dismissed, but here they weigh heavily. They move with you. They appear to you in literal form. Islam frames this detail as proof that the unseen isn't abstract. It's an accurate mirror of what you cultivated, and that flips how you picture the grave. No longer a static pit where you lie waiting, it becomes an active reflection chamber, responding not only with its shape and breeze but also by letting your own deeds stand beside you. In that sense, There's no scenario where death isolates you completely. One way or another, the grave is populated. Either you're surrounded by your good work turned into companionship, or trapped with the embodiment of what you neglected, which makes the silence heavier than sound. Your choices become bricks of comfort or thorns of torment, tightening or widening space around you. So you are never abandoned after death. What you did stays alive, not as memory, not as a record gathering dust, but as a companion breathing inside the grave right beside you. And yet, even in this state of living with your deeds, there's another reminder. This isn't the end. The grave itself remains a temporary condition, a holding place until something far greater arrives. The companions you meet now only foreshadow what awaits when all souls are gathered again. If the grave feels final, why does Islam insist it is only the beginning? From the surface, it looks like an ending. The lowering of a body, soil piling on top, silence. For the people above ground, that's all they see. But Islamic teachings say that what appears as closure is actually a threshold. The grave isn't a finish line. It's a doorway into the next stage of existence. The body may decay, but the soul continues in what's known as barzakh, a world that stretches between death and resurrection. When you hear that, the grave starts to sound less like a casket nailed shut and more like a tunnel that still leads somewhere. This is very different from the secular view most of us are familiar with. For many, death marks the full stop. The brain flatlines, the body breaks down, and consciousness no longer exists. It's considered the absolute end of awareness. But in Islam, what lies underground is only pause, not conclusion. Compared to the eternity that follows, this stage of being is just phase one, and everything you've already seen described, the questioning angels, the reshaping of the grave, the companionship of your deeds, those aren't the climax. They're the opening sequence. They get the soul ready for what's to come when the trumpet is blown. The idea of the trumpet is important. According to Islamic belief, there will come a time when an angel is ordered to sound it, and the blast will not only signal the end of all life in the universe, but also announce the resurrection of every soul that has ever lived. When that sound is heard, graves will split open, and people will be raised again for the day of judgment. Until then, what you experience inside the grave is a kind of waiting. It isn't passive waiting, though. It's a waiting full of meaning. For the believer, it becomes expectation dressed in comfort, where glimpses of paradise keep them steady. For the wrongdoer, it turns into dread, where the very idea of resurrection is terrifying because of what they've already tasted. If you followed this path step by step, you can already see how layered it is. The angels weren't just visitors, they were examiners. The grave didn't remain a hole. It transformed into a chamber of peace or a crushing pit. Your deeds weren't left behind. They turned into company that either comforted you or cursed you. All of this builds into a single truth. These aren't final punishments or rewards. They're previews, reminders, and warnings. They're preparation for what will unfold publicly, in front of all creation, when the resurrection finally happens. And that pause before the trumpet isn't arbitrary, it carries weight. In Islam, patience in barzakh is considered part of your test. If life was an opportunity to act, barzakh is the stretch where consequences linger and endurance is measured. The righteous soul bears the waiting with ease because their grave speaks of mercy. The lost soul endures torment because accountability doesn't lift after the funeral. It intensifies. This gap proves that nothing disappears without being addressed. If comfort reaches you here, it's because you earned it. If punishment holds you down, it's because your actions shaped that space. Barzakh itself is often described as a barrier. It separates the living from the dead, and it separates this incomplete state from the perfected afterlife. But it isn't neutral. It's filled with justice. No soul is treated unfairly, and no comfort or torment comes without reason. Early Islamic scholars used to describe the grave as the first stage of the afterlife. Their point was that if things go well here, every stage that follows will continue smoother. But if this initial phase is harsh, the stages after only get worse. In that sense, the grave tells you exactly where you stand, long before you rise again on the day of judgment. So perspective shifts. Instead of picturing the grave as a silent box in the earth, Islam reframes it as a gateway. You're not cut off, you're redirected, you're not in an end, you're held in a threshold. It prepares, it reflects, it teaches, and it waits. And when the signal comes, when the trumpet blast shakes the world, this gateway you entered will finally open again. Every soul will move forward together, and how smooth that step feels depends on how you walk to your grave, which means it's worth pausing and asking yourself, what kind of gateway are you building right now? Because no matter when, every soul will eventually walk through it. The grave isn't the end of your journey. It's the opening step every soul walks into. What happens there reflects what you chose in life, and that reminder alone should shift how you live each day. Your prayers, your words, your actions, they don't disappear. They meet you again in a space where nothing else follows. So live with awareness. Build the companions you'll want beside you when silence takes over. Because while we know what the teachings describe of the grave, the full reality waits in the unseen, hidden until the very moment you cross that threshold.